welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 131 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 57 of A Clash of Kings, that's Sansa 5.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter. We're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we'll provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some additional information about the characters and geography in this chapter. How are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine. It's a midday recording, which is rare for us.
Unusual.
Yes.
So this is sober Simon.
Maybe he'll be like, was his character named Fun Matt from the Friends? What's her name? Courtney Cox's character. Why can't I think of her name? Monica. Monica's boyfriend, and they call him Fun Matt because he's a lot of fun, and then he stops drinking and goes completely sober, and he's really lame.
Well, let our audience be the judge.
I guess. You came up in the, I don't know if you have seen yet, but you came up in the Discord server discussion yesterday.
Oh, I haven't seen yet.
A couple of our members were talking about yelling at the podcast when we pretend like we don't know something that is happening that we do know is happening, and then they were we were debating whether or not you actually are pretending
or pretending.
If you actually don't remember.
Oh, you guys are so funny. On the subject of people being funny, the draft list for the next season of competitive soccer has gone around. You know, at work we have a competitive soccer season.
Right. Yeah.
I'm one of the captains, and we draft the players. So the list has gone round, and basically the list comprises the names of the people who've signed up, and then just a few questions about them, so you get a sense of who they are. Because most of them we know, but a few of them are new.
Right.
So there's a kind of a free form field for putting whatever you want, like, you know, hey, I have a standing meeting, so I'll miss some games, that kind of thing, you know.
Uh-huh.
A guy that we both work with put in the free form notes section, he said, "Fun fact: Simon wears ladies' underwear while he's playing."
What? Did you buy those from our GOH account, our GOH Threadless store?
Oh. So I've been poring over this spreadsheet for like days, trying to get, you know, sort of rank everyone, think about my draft strategy. And like today I noticed this. I was like, what the?
I was going to mention that you put a lot of time and effort into preparing your draft strategy. And one thing you should know, as listeners, Simon knows this, where we work, the company we work for, people tend to stay there quite a while. And, it's always traditionally had pretty good employee retention. And so you can't just go by the picture on the, the directory profile for a particular person, because that picture could be 25 years old.
Easily. And
I don't mean that the person in the picture is 25 years old. I mean, that picture could have been when they were 25 and now they're 50.
That's it. Yes, both 25 years old. How they were and how old the picture was.
Right.
Some of the pictures are black and white. I mean, I feel like they're before colour film.
It's sepia.
All right, let's get down to business, shall we? How do we leave Sansa Stark? Last time we saw Sansa, which was only 5 chapters ago, which is a very brief turnaround. After the last time, we went 20 chapters without a Sansa.
Wow.
She was getting a bit exasperated with her Florian, air quotes, Sodontus Hollard, who only had vague promises of a ship out of King's Landing when his friend, more quotes, returned. Given that the city is now besieged, this all looks pretty flippin' unlikely.
It does.
Should a ship get through, I can't imagine it's going to be Sansa's rescuer. Right. More likely it's a contingent of onions. She was having her usual disconcerting run-in with her gruff protector/terrorizer, Sandor Clegane, and she got her first period and consequent breakfast with Cersei, at which she was warned that she would love her children, but not to love anybody else. Mackelly, why don't we give them the summary of this one?
Okay. Reports of enemy sails have reached the Red Keep, signifying that war is truly upon them. The news has caused a flood of people, prayer, and song inside the city's seps. Sansa's no exception. However, before she can pray with the others, she must first sing King Joffrey off to battle. After a quick chat with Tyrion, where he wonders which side she'll be praying for, the king spots and summons her as one might a dog, with a "here."
Joffrey is his usual unpleasant, deluded self. He's sporting a new sword called Hearteater. He makes Sansa kiss it and promises she'll kiss it again after the battle when it's covered in his uncle Stannis' blood. She asks if he'll be leading his knights into battle. He replies that he would, but that Stannis' troops won't make it across the river.
Throwing her usual caution aside, she mentions that her brother Robb always goes where the fighting is the fiercest, but then he's a man-grown, unlike your grace. Joff plans to deal with Robb once he's finished dispatching his uncle. Good luck with that. With this, he rides off surrounded by 3 Kingsguard and 4 Gold Cloaks, Tyrion following along behind.
Sansa heads to the packed sept within the Red Keep, not the larger sept of Baelor, where she sits with the unwashed masses. She says a prayer for just about everyone she's ever known, alive or dead, including Tyrion and the Hound. However, when the septum begins a prayer for the king, Sansa exits stage right. Next up is the Queen's Ballroom within Maegor's Holdfast, where all of the highborn ladies will ride out the battle.
The Red Keep is eerily empty, with all able-bodied men off supporting the war effort. In the quiet, Sansa can hear the noise of the battle carrying in from outside the city walls. As she approaches the drawbridge to the Holdfast, she encounters the Stokeworths and Shae. They're trying to coax an uncooperative Lollis to cross the bridge. Sansa tries to help with promises of food and song on the other side, but ultimately Lollis' sister Felice and Shae drag her across.
On her way to the ballroom, Sansa notices many Lannister guards. However, on closer inspection, they're merely sellswords in Lannister clothing. As the future queen, Sansa's seat is on the dais next to Queen Cersei. While making her way there, she noticed Sir Illyn Payne leaning against a wall with her father's sword ice, causing Sansa to wonder whose head the queen wants.
The queen arrives and takes her seat next to Sansa. Sansa questions her regarding Sir Illyn's presence. Cersei tells her he's there to deal with treason and to defend them. He was a knight before a headsman, after all. Cersei points out that when the axes crash through the doors, Sansa will be happy for Sir Illyn's presence.
Sansa notes all of the guards in attendance. Cersei says that they're all but useless. If things go badly, they'll bail as fast as they can and steal whatever they can on their way out. Sansa reminds the queen that a true knight would never harm women and children, to which Cersei tells her no doubt she's right. So she should just sit tight and wait on Simeon Star Eyes and Aemon the Dragon Knight. They'll surely be here any moment now to rescue her.
So war is at least just getting underway, it seems.
Yes, it seems. I mean, so there is some fighting going on, as you mentioned, but the sails are on the horizon, so the main naval thrust of Stannis' forces has not yet arrived.
Yeah. Of course, it doesn't specify exactly how long ago the sails were first seen.
True. So maybe, because, I mean, it feels like things are pretty, I mean, the ground forces are on the other side of the river, as we've mentioned many, many times.
Right.
So once they start to cross that river, which Joffrey said they won't be able to do, so they clearly haven't done it yet,
right.
That's when the fighting will really start, you'd imagine.
Yeah.
I would guess that what's happening now is that the city is throwing sort of things from catapults out into the field.
And there's
probably what
arrows and scorpion bolts and stuff like that. So at the very beginning of the chapter, Sansa sums Joff up pretty well. She's technically referring to his fancy armor, but she says it's bright, shining, and empty.
It's really lion encrusted. I mean, we've talked about this several times.
Yeah.
That he's sort of abandoning his Baratheon roots. Now, a lion is kind of cooler than a stag. I'll give it that. But there is sort of like your last name is Baratheon. People are accusing you of being a Lannister on both sides. So perhaps you should think about,
especially right now, with these rumors going around, which of course we know are true. But also he gets his right to the throne from his Baratheon side.
Baratheonness.
So you think he'd be playing that up a little bit more.
So Sansa sees Tyrion. He's as usual, kind to her, and she's a little bit cryptic about how much she cares about Tyrion. She's a little bit confused. We get her in her thoughts, and she's not sure if his smile is genuine, that kind of thing.
Right.
She does seem sincere in her promise to pray for him, and later on she does pray for him.
Right.
In the TV show, I'll mention she's much less cryptic. And George Martin was involved in the TV show. In the TV show, she pointedly says that she'll pray for his safe return every bit as much as she does for Joffrey's.
Right.
He knows what that means.
Yeah.
There's no ambiguity there.
That's kind of like when Tyrion told Varys that he trusts him like one of his own blood.
Right. But that is a slight difference, though. I mean, because clearly here she does actually pray for him,
Right.
and the Hound.
Yes. Right.
And she does not pray for Joffrey. In fact, she walks out of the church, out of the sept, when the prayers for Joffrey begin.
Yeah, she's she's not getting involved with those kind of prayers. But she hopes. So when Joffrey presents his new sword, Hearteater, to Sansa, and he makes her kiss it, and she remembers that he once had another sword named Lion's Tooth, and that Arya had thrown it in the river, and she hopes that Stannis will throw this Hearteater in the river as well. And my first thought, first of all, just a reminder about that scene, because it was quite a while ago. It was the scene on the banks of the Green Fork when Arya and Micah were play fighting, and Joffrey and Sansa were on their date, and they showed up, and Joffrey was fighting Micah with his sword, Lion's Tooth, and all Micah had was a stick. And then Arya whacked Joffrey over the back of the head with her stick. And then Joffrey tried to basically kill Arya with his sword, and Nymeria attacked Joffrey. And that's when Arya picked the sword up and threw it into the river. But maybe by that was all tragic, and it ultimately led to Micah's death. But later, during the trial, for lack of a better word, at Derry, between to decide who was telling the truth, Arya or Joffrey, Renly got booted from that trial because he kept laughing too much. And
that's right.
As he was leaving, he said something along the lines of, "Maybe later you'll tell me how a 9-year-old girl, the size of a wet rat or something, managed to disarm you with a broom handle and throw your sword into the river." So that's what she's referring to here.
Yeah. And clearly although there's a significant danger to her if Stannis wins this battle, she is clearly rooting for Stannis. And hey, there is an expression, better the devil you know, but when the person you know really is the devil, right, it's probably better the devil you don't know.
Usually that's a metaphor.
Exactly.
In this case, maybe not so much. Yes, you're right. There's also the saying, out of the frying pan into the fire, but it would take quite the fire to make things
to
work.
Be as bad as this frying pan, yes.
Yes.
Yes. Tyrion muses that he should have sent her off with Tommen to keep her safe, or to ensure he still got that bargaining chip.
Exactly. He's unclear about that. It's certainly one way to keep her captive. If the Red Keep falls, it could possibly keep the Starks from joining Stannis' cause. But if Stannis takes the Red Keep, Tywin's in quite the pickle, especially if Robb's holding the West and Littlefinger doesn't have any luck with the Tyrells. And really, in that instance, why would the Tyrells bother to join the Lannisters if they've already lost the Red Keep?
Yeah, I do think perhaps he was just thinking of her safety, because I can't imagine. He's not going to... Where's Tommen gone? He's gone to Rosby, right?
Right, yes.
So I can't imagine Tyrion plans to flee to Rosby if the battle goes against him, because one of the reasons he sent him to Rosby and remember kept some of this information from him was to keep Tommen safe.
Right, yeah.
So if he were to flee this battle, the last place he should go is Rosby, because that will draw the attention to it.
Right.
So I can't imagine he's thinking he would keep her as a prisoner by sending her to Rosby. Unless he could perhaps have leaned on Jacelyn Bywater to keep her a prisoner. If the battle goes against me, whisk her off to Lannisport.
Yeah,
or
wherever
Castle
you're.
Rock.
Remember, Jocelyn Bywater has a plan for Tommen if they should lose the Red Keep that Tyrion doesn't even know for safe, to ensure that he doesn't tell under pressure. But also, he was thinking when he and Cersei had that dinner that really went poorly toward the end there, where Aliyaya was brought in. She says to him, "Is the city going to fall?" And he says to her, "No." And then he thinks in his head, if it does, hopefully we can hold up in the Red Keep long enough for Father to rescue us. So I guess that's his backup plan.
Yeah. And of course, the other sort of wild card in all this is the Tyrells. They could also be the people who get there in time to save them if they're holed up in the Red Keep.
Right.
If they are going to join the Lannisters' cause, which seems a very big if.
It sure does. Yes, we've heard nothing about that yet. So
right.
But Joff's off to battle. Of course, he's protected by 3 members of the Kingsguard. And, I'm thinking, speaking of Joff being off to battle, Tyrion did get his way over Cersei's wishes. Cersei did not want Joff going into battle, and Tyrion said he needs to. He needs to be there. His men need to see him. They will fight harder if they see him rather than if he's hiding behind your skirt. And at the end of that chapter, at the end of that dinner, she told Tyrion, just remember, whatever happens to Joffrey and Tommen is going to happen to who she thinks is Shae, but it's actually Aliyaya.
Yeah. Right, but I mean, he's not going into the Vanguard.
Right.
I would think you're as safe on the city walls as you are inside the Queen's Ballroom. If you win, you're pretty safe on the city walls. If you lose, you're not safe anywhere.
Right.
So
that's true. Yeah, that's true. Now, he's currently being protected by Sir Meryn Trant, Mandon Moore, and Osmond Kettleblack, which this is also was a point of contention between Cersei and Tyrion, because Cersei was mad that she learned from Varys that Tyrion had planned to take the Hound off of personal protection duty of Joff, and Tyrion said, "I need the Hound and Balon Swan to lead sorties to keep Stannis' men from getting a foothold on the North Bank." And of course, Cersei just thought that was another attempt to get Joffrey killed by taking the Hound off of him.
Well, I mean, those are the best fighters amongst the Kingsguard, but that's the reason he chose them, not to not protect Joffrey, but because he needs the best fighters doing the fighting.
Right. Now, you might be wondering, wait, but that's only 5 members of the Kingsguard. Where are the other 2? Well, of course, we know Jaime is the now Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. He's held captive in River Run. And Sir Aerys Oakheart, we know, is on a round-the-world trip to Dorne. he actually might be coming back across, so...
he could bump into this battle.
Yeah. So that makes 7.
Geographically, Dorne is not around the world. He's just taking a security.
Yes, right. Yeah, it's actually not that far, but I bet he's traveling 3 times as far to get there.
Oh yeah, easily. So Sansa talks to Joffrey. He's his usual petulant self, and his whole braggadocio is so ridiculous. It's kind of like how can he say the things that he's saying and not feel ridiculous? You know, I mean, I think this is where the narcissism comes in. You know, because it's so patently obvious that what you're saying is not reality, and yet no one contradicts him, so he gets to believe it.
Yeah, it is.
The only person who actually throws any reality at him is Sansa, who's like, well, my brother goes in the thick of the fighting. Although how she knows that, it's slightly strange that the reports of the fighting from the west in King's Landing include tales of the heroism of their enemy.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, he says, my uncle, when he says battle is upon us, Sansa replies with, I'll pray for mercy for all of us. And he responds, my uncle's the one who needs mercy, but I won't give him any. And that, I'm sure, caused an eye roll to every person who read that line.
To be fair to Joffrey, he's telling the truth. He won't give him any mercy. He won't be within 4 miles of him. Because Because Stannis will be in the thick of the fighting.
Right. But I wonder if Joff might have a date with a shadow assassin. You know, I mean, why would you go away from what's working?
Well, it's a good point. I mean, maybe for this he feels he has to win it by non-magical means.
Yes,
you know, because he's got to lead this nation after this is over.
Yes,
but
that is the argument for. That would certainly be the argument for not using the shadow assassin. This is the final push. This is the one-on-one for me to prove that I am truly the king.
And if Stannis has any intel from inside King's Landing, he would also see Joffrey as being something of a trump card, because, you know, the whole antler men thing. I mean, I can't imagine Stannis had much influence over them. They were rebelling against Joffrey because A, they thought he would lose, but B, because he's monstrous.
Right.
If he was a good king, if the citizenry were, you know, not starving to death, there would be no such thing as the antler men.
Right.
They're rebelling against him because he's a monster. And so he helps to foment problems in King's Landing, which will make him seem more like a savior. If you do murder him, and then you invade and fight the Lannisters toe-to-toe, you might get less support.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought about that.
Because King Tommen, little kid, everyone likes him, you know.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But Joff says, so Sansa asks, will you lead your men in battle? And Joff says that I won't, because Stannis' men will never cross the river, but I will command what he refers to as the three whores. And so
help me out.
The three whores are the giant trebuchets, they call them, like basically catapults, who are so large that they come up over the city walls. They're built just inside the mud gate, and Tyrion rode past them after seeing his mountain clansmen off to go, fight in the Kingswood.
So, are you envisioning these as being on the floor with an arm so long that they clear the city walls when they come up?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Interesting. I gotta say that's a little bit dangerous, because you got to imagine that thing comes up real fast. Yeah, that thing absolutely comes flying up. If that thing breaks,
you could have a big hole.
You could knock a hole in the wall pretty quickly.
They didn't think about that problem. Just invite Stannis' troops in.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the Antler men should do. Should just pull that pin, you know. First 3 firings, boom, boom, boom. Oh my God, we've got 3 huge gashes in the wall.
That's a good point. He also says in this, in this same, like the very next sentence, I'm going to see to the traitors myself, which is, of course, very ominous thing to say, but it's unclear if he's referring to Stannis' men, to Stannis and his troops as the traitors, because 2 paragraphs later, he refers to Stannis as a traitor, or does this have something to do with the Antler men or other traitors within the city?
I take your question. I read it as referring to the battle because I thought it was in reference to the fact he was going to be leading the use of the 3 whores, the 3 catapults, and so I assumed he was talking about the enemies. It felt like it was too big of a sort of non sequitur to mention the Antler men at that point, but it could have been. It certainly could have been.
Yeah.
I like the fact that Sansa literally tries to goad Joffrey into getting himself killed. That's a nice touch,
right?
Which I mean, and the thing is, he is too narcissistic to even notice it, because he's like, he doesn't see. Obviously, it's sarcastic and sort of like goading to say, well, my brother goes in the thick of the battle. He's like, well, I could. I mean, I could go if I wanted to,
Yes, if there was going to be any battle on this side of the river, of course I would be there.
Yeah. I got to stand out there on the riverbank and pee into the river, and I'd be safe, because they're not going to hit me.
It was out of character for her to say.
Well, I'm not sure that's true. You said that before, and I was thinking, you know what? About once per chapter, she says something really, really dangerous to Joffrey, because she can't help herself.
Yeah.
And she usually gets a mailed fist for it.
Good point. Yes, that's true.
But I think she's getting a little bit more subtle, because this is definitely she's literally trying to get him killed by saying,
Right.
You really ought to think about it, dude. I'd be really impressed.
You know what my brother does, but of course he's a man grown. Unlike your Grace.
Yeah.
You're just a boy. I understand that you wouldn't go into the thick of the fighting.
So, Sansa goes to pray, and one thing, she prays for a lot of people. She sort of like lists every person she knows in the world.
Yes. Dead or alive.
And ends with Tyrion and the Hound. But she clearly doesn't know about the reports of Bran and Rickon's death. That has not reached her ears, although we know it's reached King's Landing. Tyrion's aware of it, but Sansa is not.
Yeah, it's not completely clear, because, like I said, she's praying for both dead and alive, but she doesn't have any thoughts about Bran or Rickon. We get her inner voice. Of course, Joff must not know, because surely if Joff knew, she'd know. He would revel in telling her this information.
Yes, agreed. So Sansa and Catelyn are the two people that we regularly see visiting septs. And that's sort of like, I think that's partly to tie them together as sort of like, Tullys. They're Tullys, not Starks, these two.
Sure, yeah.
And so they have the new gods. And it also gives us sort of like the best insight into the rituals of the worship of the Seven. So Cat prayed before the Battle of the Fords in Riverrun, right?
Yes, yeah. She prayed both before what wasn't the battle at Storm's End between Renly and Stannis.
Yeah.
And then, yes, again in Riverrun before the Battle of the Fords. And she prayed to...
Arguably, her prayer at Storm's End came very true. I mean, she prayed for no battle, right? So
yes,
she might be to blame for the whole Sir Courtney Penrose thing. and the gods leaned down and said, just be careful what you wish for.
Right. Very literal. You got to be very literal what you want. Yeah, at Storm's End, she prayed to the Mother to spare as many men as she could, which you just said.
Ta-da!
Right. At Riverrun, she prayed to the Warrior for Edmure, her brother Edmure, and her son Robb, to see them safely through battle and give them the strength that they needed. So, and that, it brings up an interesting question that Sansa poses about praying to the Seven. She thinks, those of us in the Sept are praying to the Mother for peace, basically.
Mercy.
Those on the walls are praying to the Warrior to give them strength through the battle. Who wins out when the prayers to the Mother and the prayers to the Warrior are at odds with one another? If they're all seven faces of the same God, whose prayers get heard? And that's...
I've noticed this is very prevalent in the National Football League too.
Yes, it is.
The winning team often thanks God. And I remember thinking, well, losers, you really should have been more grateful to God in advance. But then I realized occasionally they go on to win the next game, and you're like, well, and now they're thanking God.
Right.
This God is very fickle for the NFL.
God works in mysterious ways on football Sundays.
No. Not unlike random chance.
So Sansa's she goes to the Royal Sept, the one in the Red Keep, not the Great Sept of Baelor, and while she's sitting there, she's holding hands with an elderly washerwoman on one side and what she believes to be a nicely dressed little boy. She thinks he's a knight's son. She doesn't believe him to be a nicely dressed little boy. He is a nicely dressed little boy. Because of that, she imagines that he must be a knight's son or someone. And she thought it felt nice to be holding their hands. And it's just a glimpse of how much she's grown since leaving Winterfell. Because before, she would have never sat with the small folk and especially held their hands. She thought herself much too important and elite to do something like that.
I will say that this perhaps is evidence of growth, but I will also point out that it could just be utter loneliness.
Yes, yes.
In Winterfell, she was regularly hugged and therefore did not feel the need to hold hands with strangers.
Not as often hit.
Right, yes. Her only physical contact with people is getting punched, so the chance to hold hands even with a stranger probably feels a lot more reassuring than it once would have done. But I do take your point.
Yeah, that was kind of Arya's thing, to mix it up with the small folk, treat them like
Yeah.
equals, and even learn from them.
If easy.
But speaking of Arya, now I say speaking of Arya, and now I'm going to say something about Cat and Sansa.
But only to contrast with Arya, I'm sure.
Right. That both Cat and Sansa are protected, well, at least currently, from the daily fighting and strife of the small folk. Of course, Sansa has other things she's not protected from, but Arya, she doesn't have that kind of luxury to be praying at a sept for things that she would like to have happen. Not necessarily that she would anyway, because that was kind of Sansa and Cat's thing, like you said, too. They were kind of the two Starks that believed in the faith of the Seven. The others more gravitated toward Ned's old gods. But she's too busy just trying to survive. Doesn't really have time for hymns and prayers and things of that nature.
Although she did have kind of like a fairy godmother in the shape of Jack and Hagar
she
for
did.
a little while.
Yes, yes, she did.
Just mentioning this, as when we talked about that, I was thinking, blimey, it's been a long time since we've talked to Arya.
It is.
It's been a big gap.
That's
of
true.
Arya chapters.
We had a bunch for most of the book.
We
Arya
did.
was very prevalent.
She was the number one character in this book, and now she's gone completely silent.
Yeah. Tyrion's still holding strong for now.
Yeah, I think he's overhauled her. I think they were neck and neck, but Tyrion's gone way ahead of her now.
But that's not to say, of course, that all three Stark women don't have hardships. In many ways, Sansa has it worst of all. The Lannisters know what they have in her, and they can and do use, abuse, and exploit her as they see fit. Where, Arya, nobody cares about her, but she's stuck in a very dangerous situation where each day is just a struggle to survive.
And Kat, apart from the fact that every one of her children is either dead, captured by the enemy, missing, or fighting in war, has got no worries at all. I mean,
she's just skipping around River Run.
Right, exactly. She gets to see her family. She gets to eat whatever she wants. She can do whatever she wants. But those worries are pretty significant on her. Those are pretty...
I'm sure she's losing a great deal of sleep.
I will say the dead thing, apparently, I'm not sure that's true, because it turned out in the last Theon chapter, if you'll recall, that it wasn't Bran and Rickon.
Right.
Heads were tarred and hung on the wall on spikes in Winterfell.
If only that news would get to Cat.
Yes, somehow I don't think he's sending that Raven.
No, probably
Although,
not.
again, why he sent the original Raven is a mystery to me too. Here, I've done this horrible thing. Please come and kill me. I'll be waiting.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's getting off the topic to discuss that. I was going to go down that road, but I guess we'll stay on task here. Sansa prays for the Hound, and when she does, she thinks to herself, "He's not a true knight, but he did save me. Please gentle his rage." And I think maybe she says to protect him and gentle his rage, but I know she mentions gentling his rage. And of course she is right. I mean, certainly he's no true knight. He's not a knight at all. But he's done horrible things. First of all, he's threatened to kill her on the walk back from the Hand of the Tourney feast when he told her about how his face got burnt by his brother. He also mentioned that he very much enjoys killing men, women, and children.
Oh, yeah.
And
as did her father, apparently.
Right, yes. And, of course, the cherry on the top of the sundae here is we know that he killed poor, innocent Micah, which, regardless of what I'm about to say next, is absolutely an unforgivable act that we can never forget and or forgive. Yeah. But as we've gotten to know him here in King's Landing, he has done some admirable deeds, some redeeming deeds. Yeah.
Yes, certainly redeeming. That's the right word. Not anything that we can truly forgive him for what he's done previously, but certainly mitigated a little bit by some of the things he's done since.
He's done some redeemable actions, and kind of kind of like how the god, the face of the god, the stranger, is mistrusted, misunderstood, complex, neither man nor woman. Also, the god of death. There's some qualities there that you could also relate to the Hound. He's certainly by no means a true hero, but he's also not entirely a villain. He doesn't do entirely villainous deeds. He's certainly not all good, obviously, but he also isn't pure evil like Joffrey.
I'm going to set you homework for next time, Mackelly. Let's come up with the 7 characters who most embody the 7 facets of the.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think you've already nailed the stranger. That's perfect. But
and one more thing, which is I debated whether to specifically say this or not because it hasn't been mentioned yet, but I will because I don't believe it to be a plot point. But Sandor, the Hound, has a horse that he is very fond of. We saw that at the aftermath of the riot in King's Landing. He had jumped off his horse to save Sansa and came riding back on her horse. And Tyrion sent him and Bronn to go deal with the fires. And of course, he wasn't dealing with the fires, but he was more focused on his missing horse because he said out loud, nothing had better have happened to that horse. And so he's got this horse he's quite fond of, and the horse's name is Stranger.
Oh, very nice. Well done. Nice to tie that together. I'll say just you couch this in terms of a true knight and how he isn't a true knight. I think Sansa has become increasingly aware that this sort of acme of a true knight really doesn't exist. Everyone she thinks might be has, the knights she knows are definitely not that.
Right.
The closest you might think of are Jaime, say, but Jaime's capable of, oath-breaking acts and apparently sleeping with his sister, so hardly.
Barristan Selmy, we don't know how much she got to know Barristan Selmy, but maybe about the closest that she's interacted with that's actually a knight.
But
Sir Roderick.
But it feels like
Sir Roderick is a knight.
Right, but it definitely feels like her vision of what a true knight was is all fairy tale now. I mean,
absolutely, yeah. I think when she and the Hound were having that conversation at the top of that tower in the last Sansa chapter, I believe she thought to herself, there is no such thing as a true knight.
Right, yeah.
Which makes what she says at the end of the chapter, which we'll get to in a bit, all the more puzzling.
Okay. So Sansa meets Lollis and her family trying to cross the bridge. Lollis is dragging her heels because she's lost her marbles, basically. It's a notable scene because it brings together Shae and Sansa.
Right, yeah.
Who are an interesting combination. It's something that the TV show did in advance. I've mentioned the TV show has Shae acting as Sansa's handmaiden.
Right.
So they are already, in the TV show, they already know each other. Now, Sansa's a young girl, but she's from a powerful family, so she's very helpful and she shows a lot of poise in this situation. And I think this is sort of like deeply ingrained by her upbringing that she would do that. She wouldn't do it for a scruffy urchin, but for a lady like Lollis Stokeworth, she is able to sort of help coax her across the bridge. And it doesn't work because Lollis has really lost her. Yeah.
E for effort.
Yeah. In actual fact, it's Lollis' sister, Felice, who's the older sister. She arrived with the garrison that Tyrion asked for from Stokeworth.
Right.
She and Shae actually drag Lollis across the bridge in the end, kicking and screaming. So.
Yeah, and Sansa, she's also heard the rumors of Lollis being pregnant, which Shae told Tyrion at the end of last Tyrion chapter that's what's going on. And Tanda, her mom, of course, insists that she's just sick. So,
yeah, I'm gonna believe the rumors on this one.
Yeah.
Tanda would deny that, but
I don't think so.
Yeah, just it's an awful thing for Lollis. Obviously, I mean, she was horribly raped, and it's and now to be pregnant from it as well. That's just awful. And I think the Stokeworths, they're just sort of like background characters. One of the reasons the Stokeworths persist as characters is just as a reminder of the horrors that Sansa is being exposed to. Sort of. Actually, some worse things are happening to the Stokeworths, but she is close close to them and physically and sort of knows them. And so they're a constant reminder of the horrors that Sansa, not directly happening to her, but that she's surrounded by.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Sansa goes to the Queen's ballroom, and she's very troubled by the presence of Illyn Payne there with her father's sword. As Cersei said, to deal with treason and defend us if need be. He was a knight before he was a headsman. So, I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense to have, like, a bodyguard in there, but what's he going to be able to do? I mean, like, if he wasn't Sir Illyn Payne, you'd think it's a waste of a soldier. He could be out fighting,
Right.
Because if the doors get broken down by 10,000 of Stannis' troops, one knight isn't going to be able to help.
That was my first thought, was unless it's Barristan the Bold in there.
Right, but even he would lose to that. The fact that it's Illyn Payne gives a whole different attitude to this, because he is there to spare the ladies from despoilment at the hands of Stannis' troops by dispatching them all.
Yeah.
That's the only possible reason for choosing Illyn Payne.
You're right, it's not overtly stated, but I think that is the underlying reason behind it. Cersei says you'll be thankful for him if if they crash through those doors. So, I mean, there's not a whole lot of other options. That one knight isn't going to do it, and
But actually, Sansa should be practicing her lines now, because you might not need Illyn Payne if you're Sansa Stark. You say, "Hey, I surrender. I'm Sansa Stark. You might want to take me to your leader.
You're going to want me around."
Right.
Yes. Yeah. The thing about...
And definitely not despoiled, just FYI.
Right. That's not going to help your cause any.
Yes. I promise you there'll be a big payout if I get up there unscathed.
Right.
Yeah, but...
the thing about Sir Ilyn here is that he's standing there with ice, which is the Starks' Valyrian steel greatsword, and I'm still wondering why a headsman is running around with a priceless Valyrian steel sword, especially when that headsman works for the Lannisters, and they lost their Valyrian steel sword, Bright Roar, ages ago and have been trying in vain ever since to find a replacement. So why is this headsman running around with priceless sword? I get... So Tyrion mentioned when they were doing the negotiations when he was on the throne the day that he poisoned Cersei and she spent it in the privy.
Yeah.
He said he was keeping ice as a bargaining chip with the Starks. So... But it still seems odd that they just have the headsman running around with it.
I think you're making a good point, and I think that it would be solid pedantry were it not for one thing. There isn't a single Lannister in King's Landing who's capable of lifting the thing.
Yes, that is true.
So, if Jaime were there, I'm absolutely sure it would be in Jaime's possession. But as it is, they're just letting Illyn Payne carrying it, because, I mean, plus... He's a perfectionist, he wants single slice, lop the head off, and now he's got the tool to do it.
He does, right. He's got the tool for the job.
Right. But I think it's a reasonable point, but I think that it is probably just temporary. If Joffrey grows up to be a big strong fella, they'll give him the sword. If Jaime comes back, they'll give him the sword. Tywin, but as it is, just
Tywin shows up.
If Tywin would, exactly, Tywin, perfect choice, yeah. But right now, there isn't a Lannister who could really wield it. So
yeah, I guess my thought is that it should probably be put somewhere safe and not in the hands of the headsman.
Well, but he's clearly a loyalist. I mean, like he chopped Ned Stark's head off with barely a word. Cheap gag. So maybe if they have to flee, he would be in their party, and so the sword comes with,
Yeah, I guess so.
If you put it on the mantelpiece, you might forget it as you're running out the door.
That is true. At least it's on a person that has mobility, can run away with it. So Osford Kettleblack is here with them in the Queen's ballroom, and he is mentioned. He is now the captain of Cersei's Red Cloak Guard, and the Red Cloak Guard, her previous Red Cloak Guard, Tyrion sent to Riverrun with Sir Cleos, with the outward reason that a Lannister should have a Lannister Guard, but the behind-the-scenes reason is that he wanted to remove that protection and power from Cersei.
From Cersei, yeah.
And the old captain was a man named Vylar, and it's not been mentioned that he was killed. Those of the Red Cloaks who survived the escape attempt have just been imprisoned in the Red Keep.
Right.
But the thing about the Kettle Blacks, though, is that Cersei's really gotten into bed with them here. I mean, there's 3 brothers. Osmond Kettleblack is now a member of the Kingsguard. Osfrid is now head of this newly formed Red Cloaks. The third brother, Osney, he doesn't seem to have an official title yet, but he was the one that got scratched by Alayaya when she was brought out.
Yeah, and of course the underlying reason that this is of interest is that they are on Tyrion's payroll.
Yes.
She has absolutely given these guys a lot of authority. She's delegated down to these 3, who she does not know are not hers.
Right.
For the first time. She's been surrounded by loyalists to this point, and now she isn't.
Yeah, unless they've decided that she's got the better odds and have flipped sides, I guess that is.
Yeah.
They could be a dual agent.
Yeah.
So then we get to that thing that I was mentioning earlier about how Sansa says that true knights would never harm women and children. And like I was saying earlier, she's grown a lot since we first met her. And as you were saying, she's basically verbalized that she no longer believes in true knights. So it seems kind of like a childlike statement for her to make.
She still has the image of it, though. She still has the image of what a true knight would be. She just doesn't think there is anyone.
Yeah, I was wondering if she might deliberately be trying to sound naive here in front of Cersei. Because Sir Dantos, remember, she said that Cersei and Joff think she's stupid, and Sir Dantos said, good, let them keep thinking that. Keep playing, so maybe she's playing that part here. But even as the description said that even as those words came out of her mouth, they rung hollow in her ears. So maybe it was just something she's accustomed to thinking that way, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly that. She's accustomed to thinking it, but as she said it, she was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense anymore. Now I know the truth. Do you have some background for us?
I do have some background. So when she says this, when Sansa says true knights would never harm women and children, Cersei says, "Oh, of course you're right, and don't you worry. You just sit here. I'm sure Simeon Star Eyes and the Dragon Knight will be along any minute to rescue you." So
I should have guessed that's where you were headed, Simeon Star Eyes. I want to know about Simeon Star Eyes.
So Simeon Star Eyes. So back when Bran, it was right after Robb had left with the troops to go south.
Okay. Yep.
Bran was watching training in the yard with Maester Aemon, and he mentioned to Maester Aemon how maybe he could fight from Hodor's back as a means to still be a knight. Much like how Simeon Star Eyes overcame his lack of sight by he was able to fight without eyes. He lost both his eyes, and he replaced them with star sapphires in the empty sockets. And he fought with a long staff with blades on both ends that he spun around to attack 2 men at once. And Maester Lewin shot that down quickly and said, that's just a tale. Don't believe that kind of stuff. And of course,
and plus, he killed almost as many members of his own army as he did the opposition. He was absolute liability. He's just waving that thing around.
The drapes weren't safe. But it is likely just a fable, because he was considered a knight. However, it was also believed that he lived in the Age of Heroes, which was well before knights.
Those don't yes. Does not compute.
So now the Dragon Knight, his real name is Prince Aemon Targaryen, and he was born to Viserys II and Viserys' wife, Lady Lara Rogar, shortly after the end of the Dance of the Dragons. He was the younger brother of the eventual King Aegon IV, Aegon the Unworthy, who married their younger sister Nerys, who just happened to be in love with Aemon, and the feelings were quite mutual.
Okay, so you've got two brothers and a sister. The sister marries the older brother who becomes king, but she's in love with the younger brother who's in love with her too. Okay,
Exactly. Gotcha. We told you way back in the first Sansa chapter, which was episode 16 of our show, about the love between Nerys and Aemon, and how Aegon IV questioned whether his son and heir Daeron might actually have been fathered by Aemon. So, Anyway, not long after Aegon and Nerys wed,
be kind of hard to pick that up. Be kind of hard to pick that up on a DNA test as well, given like it's Targaryen no matter what.
Right? It's definitely Targaryen.
We can't be sure who the parents are, but we know for a fact who the grandparents were.
Yeah, but not long after the Aegon and Nerys wed, Aemon joined the Kingsguard at the age of 17. And he earned the nickname the Dragon Knight because the crest on his helm was a three-headed dragon of House Targaryen in white gold. And he was such
a danger to the curtains.
He was such a skilled swordsman. He was given the Targaryen Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister to wield, which is quite the honor of distinction because there were only 2 Valyrian steel swords in the house's possession at the time. Of course, now there are 0, but he's widely considered the most noble knight in Westerosi history. And as we move through this Song of Ice and Fire story, we'll talk about some of the exploits that earned him that distinction, but we'll save those for another day. But I will say that a few noteworthy tie-ins regarding the Dragon Knight with our current Song of Ice and Fire story is that Maester Aemon told Jon that he was named after his great-uncle, or great-grandfather, depending on what you believe.
Yeah.
And that Sansa's ancestor Cregan Stark and Prince Aemon once fought in a duel, and Aemon praised Cregan, saying he'd never faced a finer swordsman. And that came up, Bran brought that up when they were down in the crypts, when he was telling Osha about some of the legendary members of his household.
Right. I don't know if you've covered this in background before, and I'm not asking you to cover it now. It's just a question. What happened to Dark Sister, the Targaryen's Valyrian steel sword? That could be a future. It could be a future background if you haven't already covered it.
So we'll do a background on that. But Dark Sister went north to the Wall with a member of the family who went north to the Wall, and then that member went north beyond the Wall, and it's not been seen since.
Huh. Interesting. I don't know what you're talking about.
We'll get into it.
Okay. All right, comparison with the television show, I tipped my hand on a bit of this, but Sansa has the chat with Tyrion. Actually, Sansa's talk with Tyrion and Joffrey occurs in the throne room here. Hey, let's not have too many sets if we don't need to.
Right.
She's in the presence of her handmaid, Shae, so there's a sort of look between Tyrion and Shae while this conversation is going on.
I'm sure.
As I mentioned, the addition of Shae is very useful on several levels. In the book, Sansa Sansa holds hands with the mother and child, and she recognizes how it's nice to have that contact with, other people. Shae gives her that in the show. She does have this one outlet of friendship, and it's Shae, basically.
Okay.
And it also allows Sansa's thoughts to be said out loud. A lot of this chapter she was on her own, just moving from conversation to conversation, and we're getting her thoughts. She's so lonely in the book that almost all of it is internal.
Right.
But being with Shae allows her to have it in conversation. She does kiss Joffrey's sword and goads him to go get himself killed in the Vanguard, in slightly more subtle words than that. The scene in the Sept is dropped. There's no Lollis. In the room with the women and Illyn Payne, she has Shae for company, which I guess she did in the book too, although once they get across, I don't think she talks to Shae anymore once they get into the throne room. Is that right? Because she moves to the Days to be with Cersei.
Okay.
But in the TV show, she's still hanging out with Shae.
Right.
The conversation with Cersei is almost verbatim. But one thing, Cersei is drinking quite heavily. I mean, I just don't know if it's nerves or something, but she's drinking quite a lot. So that
Despair.
was something that I don't think...
You got a headsman around for your own use. You might be feeling rather good amount of despair.
I think I would, if I were her, I'd go last with the whole headsman thing.
Just in case.
Just in case things take a turn.
Right.
I couldn't really find any pedantry. Do you have any?
No, I mean, just the minor thing that the headsman's running around with one of the most precious swords in all of Westeros. But,
Yes.
it does make sense. Someone needs to hang on to it unless you're going to put it on above the mantle. So,
Yeah. News and notes. Random House publishing company has announced their publishing plans for the summer of 2022. It's got a heavy focus on Fire and Blood, George Martin's book, that is. Not just generally Fire and Blood.
Right.
I mean, maybe they have, like, well, Fire Department, what have you got for us today? How about you, Blood? On July 12th, they're releasing a special edition of Fire and Blood with a cover using House of the Dragons photography. A week later, July 19th, the annual A Song of Ice and Fire calendar will be released. There's two unusual details about this year's edition. First, the artwork will focus entirely on Fire and Blood. And secondly, the calendar's artwork will feature multiple artists rather than a single artist like in previous years. Who those artists will be has yet to be made public. Many House of the Dragon fans have taken note of all this Fire and Blood focus in July and have begun speculating that maybe it means that House of the Dragon will premiere in July. There's been no official word on the House of the Dragons will hit the small screen, but we do know that production was wrapped on the first season. The issue with a possible July premiere date is that the fourth season of Westworld is also set to return this summer, which could affect when House of the Dragons is available. But as Westworld Season 4 is only 8 episodes, if it starts in early June, it could finish in time for House of the Dragon to still premiere in July. Yeah, because all of these shows, HBO really uses Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time as its that's its big show night.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
And so they both vie for that slot. Yeah, so I can see why they could get in each other's way.
Right. But yeah,
exciting
with
times.
8 episodes, if they do it early enough, maybe we could be looking at a late July premiere. That would be exciting.
It would make sense that these companies talk to each other and tie in these things to make sure that they are maximizing upsells.
You want the hype machine on maximum capacity when you're getting ready to premiere a show. Of course, apologies to those listeners in the future when we're on like season 4 of House of the Dragon and they have to listen through all that. But
we'll come back and re-edit this.
Right. We got a very incredibly generous donation from Genevieve from our Buy Me a Coffee or Buy Us an Arbor Gold site. And it came with a note that I'm going to read here. It says, "Now that I'm not on a meager PhD stipend, I can finally support you guys. This podcast is the highlight of my week, and I listen to it while exercising. Add that to the list of things people do while listening to GOH. Love your work and the discussions on the Discord server." So, hey, it's a plug for the Discord server as well. So
Yeah. Genevieve's a great character on the Discord server. I've enjoyed getting to know her, and thank you ever so much. It's very kind of you.
Yes, thank you so very much for the donation. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm curious whether her meager PhD stipend has come to an end because she's dropped out, or is she Dr. Genevieve these days?
Right.
This is what we need to know.
We'll have to find out on the Discord server, Genevieve. Let us know.
All right, let's conclude this. So Sansa is definitely showing signs of maturity. She's not afraid to speak her mind. She hasn't been afraid to speak her mind. She should be afraid to speak her mind, but she's doing it a little bit more selectively now. Nor to go her own way, leaving the sept when the prayers for Joffrey begins is one example of that.
Yeah.
She's helpful to those in need, for instance Lollis, and she's gracious enough even to pray for her enemies. Well, not Cersei and Joffrey. Others take them.
Right. Not all her enemies. Just the ones who have at least shown her some level of kindness, I guess.
Right, yeah.
But so Sansa wants the Hound around protecting her, speaking of those enemies that she prayed for. Not being a true knight and mean and cruel and all, she wished that it was him in the ballroom keeping her safe, not Sir Illyn. And the last Sansa chapter, she wished that Dantos was more like the Hound in certain ways.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could mix Sir Dantos and the Hound and get a really useful knight. you could also mix Adontus and the Hound and end up with real trouble.
Right. Yes.
So having the swordsman on hand in the Queen's ballroom seems like a decent idea, but that it is the executioner who, as I've mentioned before, nominative determinism says that he would be the executioner, given that his name is Payne.
Right. Yeah.
It rather undermines the reassurance that he provides. He is pretty much guaranteed to be there to dispatch the ladies should things go badly.
Yeah, like I said, that wasn't overtly stated, but
No, it wasn't.
I don't know that there's any other conclusion you can come to as to why he's
Right.
there and why Osfred Kettleblack said the Queen thinks there might be use for him before this night is through.
Right. And you see, even the Hound couldn't do that job. I mean, he may say he likes killing, but there are some people in there, for instance, Sansa, who he would balk at killing.
Right.
He doesn't hit Sansa. He isn't going to kill her just to,
He did put his sword to her throat, but I don't think he had any intentions of.
He's all bluster.
Yes, that's right. He was
now,
just
Illyn
trying
Payne
to intimidate her.
Illyn Payne is a cold, dead shark. I mean, he will kill anyone that you tell him.
Cold-eyed killer.
You just have to point. Yeah. I'm curious where Sodontus is. Actually, now you mentioned him. Surely he's not out there fighting. God help us.
He told Sansa at one of their, at least the latest of their many meetings in the Godswood, that he should kiss Joffrey or thank Joffrey or whatever for making him a fool, because otherwise he'd be out fighting.
Okay.
So he must be just making jokes.
If I was Joffrey, I might drag my fool out there with me. If I'm going in the fighting at all, I would want my fool nearby. So the war is basically underway outside the walls of King's Landing.
And you know what? The next chapter is a rather longish. It's like 14 pages on my e-reader. Davos POV. So
okay, fighting. Expect blood. Fire and blood.
When you see us next, we might be talking about fire and blood. Not the book, of course.
My dogs have started barking, so let's get through this quickly.
All right.
3 ways you can help us. First, you can go out and leave us a review. There is no better advertising, and we would greatly appreciate it. Secondly, you could buy some merch at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. Or, like Genevieve, you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Big thank you to all those who've become sustainers, especially Genevieve.
Absolutely. And as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.